Guys okay? Yeah, everyone happy? Good. Guys, I'm sorry, they always seem to have so much fun going out the back, don't they? They come out and they've been making some in, they've been colouring some in, but by the fact that you're over 18, you guys are stuck in here with me, so apologies for that. I'll try and make it as painless as possible, and hopefully we'll learn something about Jesus through it, okay? But as we always do, we start with a bit of a quiz, get our thoughts going and get ourselves in gear, okay? So a couple of questions. Let's have a look. Question 1, the first tea bags were made of silk. So they used to have, instead of whatever they're made of now, they used to put the tea in the silk, apparently. True or false? False. How many do you reckon false? True, I think. False? How many do you reckon true? Guys, it's true. Oh, they actually did used to do it. Yeah. Sorry, Emmanuel. Yeah, no, actually. You were committed to that though, weren't you? Yeah, Donald Duck's middle name is Fauntleroy. Don't ask me how they gave him that name, but apparently that's Donald Duck's middle name. Or is it? How many do you reckon it is? So Mark reckons it's true. Fauntleroy. True? How many do you reckon it's true? Yeah, Scott, Mark, Lyndon. How many do you reckon it's false? Guys, it's true. It is true. It's honest, it's true. Okay, next one. Monkeys were the first living thing to travel into space. How many do you reckon true? How many do you reckon false? You're having a shock with me. It's false. Mate, it's false. Since 1947 or something, I was reading, they've been putting fruit flies up in space. So they weren't actually technically the first living thing to go into space. Fireflies were. Okay. Question 4. Charlie Chaplin came first in a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. Right. How many do you reckon it's true? How many do you reckon it's false? How many don't know? You're too afraid to answer that, aren't you? Guess what? It's false. Yeah. He came third. It's the truth. He came third in a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. For those of you who don't know who Charlie Chaplin was, he was sort of like an actor, comedian sort of thing back in the early 20th century when they first started making films. And yeah, he came third. Wouldn't believe it, would you? So I'm going to have to correct Clive on this. We've actually moved past the Living Light series and we haven't updated it. So we're on the new series now. It shows our finger on the pulse as always, isn't it? But mate, so we're going through this book. It's a book written by a friend of mine. He kicked it off last week. A guy called Nigel James. And it's entitled 7 Ways to Ignite Your Life. Life Lessons from 1 Samuel. So we're going for 7 weeks through the book of 1 Samuel. Looking at different people within there. Samuel, King Saul, King David, and learning how to ignite our lives as followers of Jesus. We want to be people who are passionate, who are full of love, who are full of courage, wanting to serve Jesus. And so hopefully over the next few weeks, we're going to be learning a bit more about that. And so my task, the second week, is to learn about how we commit ourselves to the worship of God, So, before we do anything else, it's good to define what worship is, isn't it? What is worship? If I had to ask you what worship is, what would people say? Prayer. Okay. Singing. Giving. Praising. Yeah. Every day. Yeah. So all these are sort of, really, if you think about it, they're more like Christian terms, isn't they? Or religious terms, I might say. So prayer, praise, worship, doing it every day. These are all sort of religious terms to do with worshipping God. But actually, the Oxford Dictionary gives worship as being the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration. So what we worship, actually, is what we think about, what we give our time to, what we give our energy to, what we give our money to. It's basically what we give all of our attention and energy to. So we are made to worship, basically, aren't we? As people who are made in God's image, meant to be connected to Him, our whole existence is meant to be giving Him our praise, our adoration, our energy, and our worship. We are designed to worship. Human beings do it naturally. The question is, it's not what do we worship? It's not, are we designed to worship? We are designed to worship. The question is, who do we worship? We are all designed to worship. The problem is, though, we often worship the other things, the wrong things, don't we? The question is, what do you give your time, your effort, your energy, your time, Have I said that? Your thought life. What consumes your thought life? Well, that's a pretty good indicator then of what you worship. What do you worship? So with all this said, let's go to the book of 1 Samuel, okay? So I'm going to summarize about 3 or 4 chapters of the Bible in about 2 minutes. You guys ready? Sit tight, it'll be over before you know it, I promise, okay? So 1 Samuel chapter 3. Nigel spoke about it last week. God calls this little boy, this 11-year-old boy called Samuel, and he calls him to be a prophet to the people of Israel. And then in 1 Samuel chapter 4, it sort of pans out, and we get a picture of what's going on in Israel at the time. And Israel are in a bit of a pickle, to be honest. They're at war with their arch enemies, the Philistines, and things aren't going too well. They're losing battle after battle after battle. And so, the Israelites have a bright idea. They say, okay, well, let's take the Ark of the Covenant, which is symbolic of the presence of God. I think I've got a picture. There it is, the Ark of the Covenant. In it had the 10 Commandments, and it had other things, and it was symbolic of the presence of God. Where the Ark was, God was. So the Israelites had this bright idea. They said, okay, well, let's take the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence, let's take it into battle, and hopefully, surely, like God has done in the past, he's going to bring us victory. Unfortunately, it didn't go quite the way that they planned. In fact, the opposite actually happened. So the Philistines not only beat them, they nicked the Ark as well. So they took the Ark back to where the Philistines live. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. And for 7 months, they had the Ark of the Covenant. But actually, bad things started to happen to the Philistines. So they gave the Ark back. So they gave the Ark back to the Israelites. But the Israelites didn't actually do what they were meant to do with the Ark. They put it in a tiny little town that no one had ever heard of, and they forgot about it. They forgot about it for 20 years. See, for us as followers of Jesus, it's not simply enough for us to have the presence of God and to carry the presence of God, which we all do. If we have faith in Jesus Christ, we have the Holy Spirit, we have the presence of God in our lives. But it's not simply enough just to carry the presence of God. See, the Israelites had the Ark, they had the presence of God, but they put it in the corner. And they just put it, they sort of forgot about it. They didn't give it its right place in their lives, in their culture, in their environment. And I wonder how many of us, as followers of Jesus, we say, yeah, I'm a Christian, I've got God in my life. I've got the presence of God in my life. I know God, but he's amongst other things. He's a God amongst others. Yeah, I say I'm a Christian, but actually all my effort goes on other things. My image, my finances, my job, being successful, being safe, whatever it may be. I'm actually worshipping other things alongside of God. Do you fall into that category? I know I do sometimes. I've been guilty of that. So anyway, 20 years the Ark sits in this little town, this town that no one's ever heard of. And then in comes Samuel. 20 years plus after God called him as a little boy, this is the first prophecy that he's going to give as a prophet to Israel. This is the first time that God has said, Samuel, go and say this to my people. And this is what Samuel says. Well, actually, no, before that. The glory is departed from Israel, for the Ark has been captured. So, just to illustrate the point, this is a summary of what's going on. The Ark has been captured, the presence of the Lord is gone, but they've now got the Ark back, okay? But this is what Samuel says. Let me come back to that in a minute. Then Samuel said to the people of Israel, if you want to return to the Lord with all of your hearts, get rid of the foreign gods and images of Ashtoreth. So basically what's going on now is they think, well, God's abandoned me. God's abandoned us as a people because we're still having troubles, we're still losing against the Philistines, even though we've got the Ark of the Covenant. So what we're going to do is we're going to start worshipping other gods and see if they help us out. So not only are they not giving God the right reverence that he deserved, they're now worshipping other gods. So in comes Samuel and he says, well, if you want to change what's going on in your life, you need to get rid of the other idols. Turn your hearts to the Lord and obey him alone. Then he will rescue you from the Philistines. So the Israelites got rid of all their images of Baal and Ashtoreth, those are the two gods, and worshipped only the Lord. Then Samuel told them, gather all of Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered in Mizpah, and they poured out water before the Lord, and they also went without food all day and confessed that they had sinned against the Lord. It was in Mizpah that Samuel became judge of Israel. In other words, he became the leader of Israel. So this is what's going on. This is from a guy called Spurgeon. He lived a couple of hundred years ago. He was a great English preacher. he says the worst enemy that the Philistines held over sway of the land. There was a worse thing going on than just the Philistines, just the enemies of God. The people were in double bondage. There were two things going on, says Spurgeon. The heavy yoke of the Philistines was upon them. In other words, their enemies were coming down on them because the heavier burden of false worship was crushing the life in their hearts. So there was a bad thing going on and there was a worse thing going on. The bad thing is the Philistines are against us and they're winning. The worst thing that's going on is the worshipping of other gods and idols was crushing the life out of them. I don't know if you feel sometimes the life being almost crushed out of you, even though you're a Christian, even though you're following Jesus. It feels like, gosh, you're walking with bricks on your feet. You're just about going forward with your day because the life's getting crushed out of you. May I suggest maybe your worship is in the wrong place? May I suggest maybe your worship is divided. And like Spurgeon says, things are going bad in your life. You're feeling like the life is crushed out of you.